Open houses, the pros and the cons.
Coming up next on Real Estate Dirt.
So we are going to talk today about pros and cons of an open house as a whole. I think that sellers have some very strong opinions about an open house, one way or the other. Strong was the word I was looking for, right?
Usually.
And I think the thing I hear the most often is that they just don't want nosy neighbors coming in. And open homes don't sell houses. And, they don't want strangers in the house. Like maybe they'll steal something or, right?
COVID happened. They don't want it, people breathing in the house, that sort of thing.
Right. So they can be concerned. Now, I will say that, well, if you're going to have showings, you're going to have buyers, so they're going to be strangers. But I do admit that buyers walking through with their agent, the agent's responsible for that client walking them through as a licensed agent. Whereas on open house, if they're not run properly by your agent, you definitely should have a concern. Our team, we always require another person to be with for safety reasons, right? I think too often people think there's just one agent sitting there, and we always ask another agent to go, or at least we ask the seller permission that we can have a spouse or a significant person in our life that we know, like, and trust to sit the open house with us, but also to stop anybody in the foyer. If we get more than one couple or more than one person through the open house simultaneously, so they can hold them in the front while the agent is escorting them through the house and making sure, right, being responsible for that potential buyer throughout the house.
One agent sitting in open house is a total recipe for disaster.
For sure.
Because think about it, if you have multiple parties come in,
they're
not going to want to be on top of one another. One party's going to go in one direction. One party's going to go in the other direction. If they've got kids are going to touch things, get into things. And then, of course, it's not often, but it does happen where people who have bad intentions, maybe they want to steal something, they come in, they split up, and makes it harder for the realtor.
Yeah. So the realtor, we train them. We have to be upfront with everybody and say, hey, we only allow one to tour through at the time at request of the seller. And they have to wait. They have to wait, whether it's outside or in the living room or in the hallway. And that's why we always have a second person there.
It's a safety and security issue.
Right. But if run right, I definitely think an open house is a good idea. Exposure is good. I know you're going to get a nosy neighbor here or there. I get it. But you also kind of want your nosy neighbor to know your house is for sale and be able to see it. Maybe they want their best friend to move into the same neighborhood as them, or their brother or their sister or something like that. And if they get in there and they get excited about it, they'll go and tell whomever, like, hey, come by the house next door to me. So in my opinion, you do want the neighbors to know, and you do want them to see it. You want them to talk about it. They love their neighborhood. Why wouldn't they brag to other people about how awesome your house is?
Well, they also come in there and then they tell their friends or their family that they want to move into the neighborhood about the awesome realtors that were hosting the open house.
Hopefully that would be nice. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, the truth is you only need one buyer. So even though open houses, it's an old stat, but I remember the National Association of Realtors putting out a stat that an open house sells a house 2 to 4% of the time. Not huge, right?
It sounds about right.
So don't expect to have an open house. Well, 6 months ago you had an open house. You had an entourage coming through.
That's not normal. Just put it out of your mind. Just forget about it. It didn't happen.
Going back, that's good. That's good. But going back to normal markets, which is where we're going to.
Normal interest rates.
Right. This is where you're not going to get floodgates opened up, right? But exposure, whether you got 1 or 2 or 10 buyers through that property, you only need one buyer to buy the house. So
if they're married too,
exposure is always a good thing. Plus, another angle, sometimes agents will use it as first look. We did that during COVID. First look, house goes on the market on Thursday or Friday, and you have an open house on Saturday or Sunday. for the agents to bring through their clients, as well as the public can come through independently. And it can be more convenient for the seller to have a set amount of time for at least that first weekend or second weekend that you do the open house to, hey, I'm gone from 11 to 1 or 1 to 3. It's easier than not knowing exactly.
You can control your time better that way.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
So, Nicole, why do realtors typically hold an open house?
Okay, realtors do usually...
Here's the dirt.
The dirt is realtors do usually get business because there is a good amount. Like if it's a 2 to 4% sells the house, well, then the other 98 or 94% or 96%, 96, 98. My math was bad off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Are just starting to look or curious, and they can get either a seller, right, in the neighborhood, or they can get a buyer who's not quite ready.
Bingo.
And they'll be ready 6 months from now because they're just starting to get a feel for it. So realtors do get business from the open house.
It's a common thing that the realtor is there primarily to try to get a new client who walks through the open house, but it is a good thing still for the seller for the exposure.
Yeah.
Exposure is never a bad thing.
Right. And you're getting some feedback from whoever comes through. Whether it's 1 or 10 or 20, you're going to get feedback on what they thought of your home that you might have to take into account or that was maybe overlooked or reinforced, whatever the case may be. But the buyer determines if your house sells or not, right? If they don't love it and they find something else, your house doesn't sell, bottom line.
I mean, sometimes, here's some more dirt. Sometimes there is a disconnect between the listing agent and the sellers don't want to, I mean, I hate to say this, but this is the dirt, this is reality. They don't want to believe what we're saying why their house isn't selling.
Yeah.
You know, hey, your house smells like cat pee, you never cleaned that up. Or, hey, we think your house looks great, but compared to other properties in the neighborhood, you're a little overpriced. You need to do a price reduction. They don't want to hear it. So then the ulterior motive for some agents is they'll hold the open house, wait for that feedback from the buyers or potential buyers that come through, and then give that feedback to their seller and try to work on those issues with the home.
To help reinforce what they said. So that's two ways to do an open house. Sometimes open houses are later in the market time because it's not selling. So we need to know we need to pull out all the stops and we need to know why it's not selling, get some feedback, right? It's also done early on because you can get the most interest, and the most interest, as we said in other videos, gets you the highest price. So exposure is a good thing. Yes, we want your neighbors to come because we want their friends to want to move in next door to them. So yes, we want those things. And I'll give you 2 last points that I have learned about open houses. So one agent I talked to, I can remember her telling a story about how the buyers who ended up buying her seller's place was out of town at the time. And the fact that they had the open house made the difference on these buyers actually getting that house. Because what you don't know is that in real estate, because we're all independent contractors, it's really hard sometimes to get somebody to fill in for you when you're away.
True.
And your buyers feel abandoned. But in this case, the open house made all the difference. Another story I had heard from somebody, I don't know, I can't remember where I heard it, but they went into a house. I don't think it was local. They went into a house, had no intention of buying or selling a house.
They were just curious.
Just curious, looky-loos. Walked in, loved it so much, they bought it and then put their house on the market after the fact. Like, it is an emotional response.
You never know what's going to happen at an open house.
You just don't know. So that's one more little slip in. That's why you want your house to show the best out the gate and do all the little things that your agent tells you to do. So you get top dollar, because to get top dollar, you have to show like top dollar. It is a price war and a beauty contest, people.
Especially now with the market having changed.
Yeah, becoming more normal. Price war and beauty contest. Here we go. So that's all I have.
That's all I have.
So do the open house. Just make sure you check with your agent on how they're going to do it so you know you're protected and that their process is covering all the bases. So if you liked us, please like
and subscribe.
Please subscribe. Please watch another video if you're thinking about selling your house or buying another. And we will see you next time.
Peace.
So we are going to talk about the pros and cons of open houses. It is a debatable topic, right?
Yeah, I think so.
overall.
I think we should also shake the table.
You know what?
Makes everything more interesting.
I
And
got
you did it again.
I gotta be me. You know what? He's just trying to stifle me, and I just can't have it anymore. I'm just gonna roll with it. I mean, he's just gonna have to tolerate it. He's telling me not to wave around my glasses, all sorts of things.
We're gonna stop this and start over.
Okay.
You're actually still
Start over.